talk about the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab, especially because I just finished the last book, A Conjuring of Light, in the series. If you can't tell, these are kind of thick girls, so I definitely expect that you want to check out the timestamp that I have floating around in this video and maybe even hold down for 2x speed, because even though I'm going to give a synopsis, it's probably going to be vague in an attempt to be spoiler free. I'm also going to be suggesting other fantasy series that this book is like. You know, I got some opinions, so I can definitely see this video getting up there in time. Another thing you might notice, and I'm sorry if this is eating away at your soul, is that they're different cover designs. And that's because when I first discovered the series, right around this first book was published, I was definitely gung-ho, and then I went into purchasing the second book as soon as I could. Second book, not so much, not gonna lie. I'm probably not gonna be giving a thorough review of this one because I don't really remember why I didn't like it. Just know that it dragged for me. So much so that it took me a while to finally get the last book. And now here we are with different designs. Aside from the really good color blocking, there's elements in the story that up to this point I hadn't really read before, so I was immediately hooked from the first couple pages. This focuses on a universe in which there's different Londons, I guess you would say parallel Londons, each with their own color scale that matches up to their magical abilities. The very first character we're kind of introduced is Kel. He's badass, he's got a magical coat, and he's one of the few people in his universe that has the ability to travel between these different worlds. By few people, I mean he's the only one. You can tell because he is an Antari, not Atari, Antari with an N, meaning he's got mismatched eyes and that special magic to open those doorways. As a messenger for his king, he travels between the different London kingdoms, mostly like on spy missions to be like, hey, this place has magic, this place doesn't, and it sucks. And like all good spies, he now has a side business, a little bit of a magical smuggle hustle that couldn't possibly get him into trouble. Except that it does. I mean, you gotta move the plot forward somehow, right? That's when we're introduced with another character who may also be an Antari, who just so happens to use her abilities to steal. I'm sure you can imagine how they ended up running into each other, especially because it takes place within these parallel Londons, and there's some Londons with magical abilities and some that do not have magical abilities anymore. This ended up reminding me one of my favorite fantasy series, His Dark Materials, but because these are older characters, it is geared to a more mature audience than His Dark Materials. Book 2, did it suck? Not really, I just don't remember it. But when I did finally start reading A Conjuring of Light, not only was I kicking myself for not getting the same version that I originally started off with, I was also just like annoyed that I put it off for so long, because within the first pages, just like the first book, it is action-packed. I would say the downside is that there's so much action that by the time the book ends and everything's wrapped up, I'm like, what the heck, you can't do that to us, continue the story. But mainly the second book has a lot of important action and is needed in order to get us to this third book. There's been upheavals between the different kingdoms, upheavals between who they thought was the villain and who they thought was in control. Because the third book is so action-packed and actually incorporates this whole overwhelming darkness that's taking over the region, this actually reminded me a lot of the later half of the Bone and Shadow trilogy, then another Bone trilogy, the Bone Witch trilogy. I feel more so because the plot within this book seems to focus more on those familial bonds, death, resurrection, things that you get within the last couple books of the Bone Witch. And then the last fantasy series I'm going to compare the entire thing to, because the super magical people within this book have mismatched eyes, it definitely reminds me of the Graceling series. I love to talk about that fantasy series so much. A little bit more on the young adult side than the mature adult side, while also still tackling some very difficult conversations when it comes to who's control, PTSD, despots, and it includes talking animals. That series also incorporates like physical abilities, different colored eyes to tell you that they're super magical when it comes to what they can do. And after reading a couple of V.E. Schwab's standalone novels and enjoying them, I can't wait to actually jump into any of the other series that they have written. I think I want to get into that Villain Vicious books. Is that the same series? Is that the same name? Am I completely butchering it? If I'm completely incorrect and you made it to the end of this video, feel free to correct me in the comments below.